This is the No More Wasted Days podcast, and we're your hosts, Sarah Kaufman Bradstreet
and Heather PG. Grab your favorite NA drink and listen as we share vulnerable stories so you never feel alone on your alcohol-free journey.
And gain insights from us as we break down our most used tips and strategies that have kept us alcohol-free.
It's time to break free from wasting any more of your days to the drinking, blackout, hangover cycle.
Welcome to another episode of the No More Wasted Days podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sarah.
I'm Heather.
And we are going to be talking all about managing change while being alcohol-free.
Yes, this is a hard one.
It is. And I'm looking over, Heather did the notes for today's thing, and you guys are going to get some really good tips, strategies, so this won't feel very hard.
Yes. I want to start, first of all, check out the link in the show notes for the day makers. And I jumped right into that because I did this topic on a day makers call recently. So y'all could get first access and be able to interact in real time on these topics and get more tips and strategies.
Yeah, come join us.
Yes. Come on, y'all. All right. I want to kick this episode off by mentioning a favorite quote from Matthew Perry's book. This is a loose quote. People like us hate two things: change and the way things are. When I read that last fall, I was like, if that is not true, because, and I don't know if he exactly said people like us, but I'll definitely identify in that. And it's just so true. Change and the way things are. It just like landed with me.
Yeah.
So that's a super good segue into an episode about alcohol and change.
Yeah, I love that. If you have not read the Matthew Perry book yet, go read it.
It's so good.
Yeah, it really is.
So if y'all been listening for a while, I like to define things and I like to understand the nature of things. So people say, I don't like change. And I used to say that constantly. I don't like change. I don't like change. But understanding the nature of change, I think, is important. So I think a lot of why people do not like change is the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And I deeply dislike the fear of the unknown in most areas. I think most people do.
Yeah. Oh, it gives me anxiety. Sometimes I'll go, oh, you're only anxious because this is the fear of the unknown. And sometimes just knowing it and claiming it is so big. So
Yes.
if you're hearing it and going, oh, I hate the fear of the unknown. Cool. Now you know that about yourself.
Yeah. And then when you step outside of your comfort zone, you're already afraid of what you don't know. You're out of your familiar routine. And obviously quitting drinking is a humongous fear of the unknown. It's a humongous step out of your comfort zone. And I think some key ways to like help that is listening to the podcast, getting in community, doing independent research, and creating new routines.
Yeah.
Micro routines so that you can become more familiar with your new journey, your new life.
And doing it in these little bite-sized pieces. So you're stepping out of your comfort zone just a little bit each day or each month, each week. You don't have to do it each day if you don't want to. And it'll become easier. And suddenly the comfort zone will be pushed out farther and farther and farther.
It's like a muscle. It's a practice.
It really is.
And then when we're thinking about change, there's always that element of losing control. I have always found it fascinating that a lot of folks who drink a lot are oriented to control.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big old oxymoron.
You just did a call on that too for the day makers, didn't you?
I did. I chuckled because the way I led that call in was singing, not like real singing like Sarah does, but about hello, darkness, my old friend. Because, I mean, I don't know many people who don't want control of their lives, and it can be like a way to rage against the change machine.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say I'm a major control freak. And I feel like I learned that more once I quit drinking. And drinking allowed me to not be a control freak. It allowed me to feel easy breezy, as I like to say about myself. And I finally just realized like, it's okay. It's okay to want that control, but it's also something I try to manage. And there's a lot of self-talk going on all the time about You don't have to control this. You can't control the time. It will always be moving. Like there's little things with myself that I have to really go, let's not try to control this one, but you can control anything that has to do with yourself.
Yeah. One of the tips you gave on a call that you led recently was make a list of what you can control and what you can't.
Oh, yeah.
And that's so simple
Mm-hmm.
and powerful. And I did
Mm-hmm.
it. And there's not a whole lot that I control, turns out.
Right? I know I was going to say, I'm like, I bet the list is really small of things you can actually control because it really is only things that you do and how you react. Everything else out of your control. So
Yeah.
just don't worry about it, guys.
And a lot of us want to hold on to that emotional attachment to past routines, trying to control our environment. And when you're quitting drinking, the way that I did as far as attachments to the past was I changed my entire routine,
Mm-hmm.
meaning like a different route home, different place to sit, different bedtime for myself, different places to go eat. There's a lot of change. And I think those little tiny steps, like you were saying, Sarah, can be really helpful with the attachment to the past in terms of drinking.
Yeah. And there's the attachment to the past of drinking, of, like you were saying, the habit, and then sometimes how it made you feel or just different emotions that it brought you. And some of those emotions may be great ones and some may be really hard ones. So you have to start exploring the different methods of just letting it go, which can just be changing up your space, but also doing things like journaling and really starting to go, why am I trying to hold on to this so much? Do I need to hold on to it? Because the past is another thing. We have no control over it. So, and it's already done. So
Yeah.
it really is like, it's so hard though. Easier said than done.
I work a lot with folks in my one-on-one sessions about how to let go to attachments from the past. So we always come up with some really creative ways to actually do that. And because, when people are like, just let it go, they're so minimizing. Like, if I could
Right.
let it go, I wouldn't be ruminating. Damn it. Right?
Right. And sometimes you're like, I'm trying to let it go by telling you all about it. Okay. It's
Right.
part of the process.
Yeah. So I think attachment to the past is a big part of change. And then our habits and routines.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah and I talk about them a lot. I've done the field research, and they are so important to break old habits so that you can embrace new habits or newer habits.
The routines, habits, we talk about that all the time, but
Yeah.
and there is that level of when you're going through change in your alcohol-free journey and you're trying to manage the change that's happening. Maybe it's a big move, maybe it's your kids going back to school, maybe it's, there's change is always happening, right? But when it's happening, usually our habits and routines get thrown off also. So it's
Yes.
something to even start getting ahead of, like going, okay, the school season's going to start for my kids. That's going to change my routine. How can I get ahead of that now? And I feel like that's something I'm becoming better and better at. The more I really realize that habits and routines are so good for my self-care, for me feeling my best, and for me being able to manage change in an efficient way.
Yes, absolutely. I'm on a current new experiment of boundaries with myself in terms of routines, and I'm excited about it. So I love an experiment. I'll keep y'all posted. And then again, going back to change our identity and self-perception. I'll give an example. I've been a social worker for, I don't know, since God was a baby. And it has been off and on my identity. And I'm obviously a mama. That is a big part of my identity, but not all, because I wasn't a mother till I was 40. So I think that the identity piece with alcohol, like when you talk about drunk Sarah, or drinking Sarah, it's a big shift in self-perception and identity when you're going from a drinker to a non-drinker. It's huge.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like that is one of the hardest things that I wasn't expecting. I was just kind of like, oh, I'll just quit drinking. No big deal. And it changed my whole world. But I was all of a sudden like, oh, I don't really know who I am. I know who drinking Sarah is, and I have created a whole world around alcohol and definitely a whole identity. And part of that is because at the time I was a Beachbody coach and we were trained to, I say it like we were trained, like it was a little cold, but I'm just like, part of our training of what we should share on social media is parts of us. So people were gravitating to us and going, oh, I like her because she likes this. So one of my things that I would talk about a lot was I love drinking beer. It's part of who I am. And I almost think that that made it so it really started taking over my identity, because I was even like, okay, I need to share about that. I need to share about that as regularly as possible on social media. How can I share that I'm having a beer, but I still work out and I'm still healthy and all those things? I mean, it's a huge cluster. It's just a big, but I really do think that perpetuated my identity as a drinker. But then I started going, oh gosh, am I always going to be this way? Is this just who I am? And I remember thinking before I quit drinking, yeah, you're always going to be drinking party Sarah. It's just who you are. And I thought that it's just who you are. It wasn't like, hell yeah, that's who I am, which now
Mm-hmm.
that's how I feel about being sober. I feel power in being sober. I never say, oh, I'm just sober. Like, no,
Right.
no way, man. I'm sober and it has changed my life. So if you are sitting in a place where you're like, well, it's just who I am, it's how my friends know me, it's how the world sees me, you can make the change. I promise. If I could make the change, you could.
It definitely, I'm sure that a lot of listeners agree that it's woven into their identity and self
Mm-hmm.
perception for sure.
Yeah,
And social environmental influences. And that's a good segue on to what
it
you said
is.
about like your friends will know you as like wild party Sarah. Like that's how you will be known in your environment and with your social, like in your social life.
Yeah.
And then societal norms. For example, people drink at baby showers. They don't use heroin usually at baby showers.
I haven't been to one yet where it's
Me neither.
happened.
And then, you know, so that like helps us form that self perception of like, oh, I am just a drinker because we do it at 10 in the morning at a baby shower.
Yeah, it happens everywhere. And there's that fear with change going, well, what will I do at a baby shower when I'm offered champagne? Or how am I going to handle that? And I promise you, it's actually not that strange when you only take the orange juice and not the champagne. And
It's
I know
actually not
it's,
that good.
yeah, and I know that it sounds crazy because when I made a mimosa, it was mostly champagne. Like orange juice was this afterthought, little dropper in there, right?
Turns
But
out I don't like orange juice. That's why I said it
oh,
doesn't
really?
taste good.
I did grapefruit juice in mine, and I like grapefruit juice. I still put grapefruit juice every night into my tonic water. So you just find other ways to do it. And that's part of making the change. Like you prep yourself before you go to the baby shower or the wedding shower or the whatever, where you know the drinks are going to be, and you go, what am I going to drink? And how am I going to do it without causing a scene? Like, which I know, I know you won't, but it is, you feel like all eyes will be on you, is more what I mean. So, how will you handle that moment? And I've even been handed champagne. Everybody does a toast. And I think, oh my God, in my brain, I'm going, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? But I just cheers and I set the champagne down and I walk away. No one notices. If I know I've got a
Yeah.
friend with me that's a drinker, I'll say, here, take mine. It's also not weird, but it's, I don't know, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but don't be afraid of that change. It's less than you think it will be in some circles.
Yeah. It's a good opportunity to you as you get a little stronger in your alcohol free muscle to reevaluate, are these good time Charlies or are these part of my quarters, my 4 quarters?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then cognitive load, which I really like this in terms of change, understanding the mental strain of processing change. It's big, the load is heavy. And I think if you just try to acknowledge it without judgment and give yourself some compassion in terms of, I'm going through a huge change, it takes time to process. Now, mind you, when people say, like, well, Heather, it just takes time, that's also minimizing too, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you're journaling or having your internal dialogue, give yourself some compassion because it's a huge change.
Yeah. I feel like that one is so important to understand, that the change just takes up a lot of brain space. And when we first moved, it was not just a normal move. It was we put most of our stuff in storage. We moved to a camper trailer and a yurt, and suddenly we were living outside, basically. It was a big change, and I minimized it. All I looked at it was, oh my God, I'm chasing my dreams. Look at me. I'm doing this thing that I said I was going to do. I'm going to build my own house. And then all of a sudden, 4 months into it, I'm super depressed. And I'm not depressed going, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done this. It wasn't like that. It was just like, I'm really low. I can't figure this out. I never gave myself the space to just go, you know what? It's okay if I'm feeling down. It's okay if I'm feeling stressed. This is a really big change. And that's one thing I always wish I don't, there aren't too many things where I wish I could go back and change things. I wish I could change how I handled that with me, with my kids, even talking about it more to Ryan and just saying, like, this is a really big thing we're all doing. And how's
Yeah.
everybody doing? Doing little check ins.
That's really inspiring because I've minimized everything I've ever been through my whole life. And I
Mm-hmm.
just moved in June. And
Yeah.
that's really inspiring. Thank you for saying that.
Well, and moving is, I feel like, one of the biggest changes. And I feel like me and Ryan have figured it out now because we've still been in the process of moving because we're getting things out of storage, getting the camper trailer off the land, then getting everything into the yurt and the house. And we still have things in a storage unit. So it's like, I know it's not done yet, but I think I do so much better now at going, this is a really big deal. It's okay if you feel stressed. It's okay if you feel sad, happy. It's okay if your emotions are all over the place during this change. And I think that that has helped me a lot.
Yeah, for sure. So before we go into the next part about the types of change and their impact, I want to invite y'all again to check out the link in the show notes for one-on-one coaching. I have some spots available. I'm working with folks about this very topic at the moment, and we have it priced where it's pretty affordable. So check it out. And then the Daymaker that's always open.
Always. And then Sober October is coming up. Believe it or not, we're actually almost halfway through September when you'll be listening to this episode. And it's never too early to start thinking, do I want to take a 30-day break from alcohol? And do I want to do it with some support? So I'll put a link in the show notes for Sober October. And there's also a coupon code. Just enter podcast when you are checking out and enrolling for the challenge, and you will get 10% off your enrollment. So go check that out. Take advantage of that special opportunity to save because you're a podcast listener.
Check it out. So we've touched on some of these about types of change and their impact. So personal changes, ending a toxic relationship, and my relationship with alcohol was probably the most toxic relationship I've ever had. And I've had a few.
I don't mean to laugh at that. It's just your delivery was spot on.
And well, some things are, And like moving, like Sarah and I talked about, adjusting to a new lifestyle, like being alcohol free, having a baby. And when we were talking about give yourself some compassion and just acknowledging like, hey, this is a big adjustment. This is a big change. And then when you think about your career, job changes, new job loss, new responsibilities at work, and, all the tips that we're going to give you on how to cope is applicable to all of them. Whether they're personal, professional, or social, like losing old drinking friends, making new sober friends, going to events, alcohol free.
Mm-hmm.
This may sound really strange, but I went to my first sober funeral Saturday.
Yeah.
What do I mean by that? I didn't have a hangover and I wasn't headed to the bar directly after,
Yeah. And man, that can be a huge trigger. I mean, in many ways, because you're grieving, but there's always that after where people are hanging out and people start drinking. And that's when you talk about the person who's recently passed away. Let's share stories. Let's have deep thoughts. Let's do all those things.
Yeah.
I actually remember that happening after my grandpa's funeral. And I was in my 20s, fairly young, like 22. And I remember, gosh, this is the first time I'm really drinking with my parents, with my uncles. And I remember thinking to myself too, like, this makes it easier. Like my brain was already making the connections of, oh, have a beer, you're not as sad. Instead, now you're just sharing fun stories about grandpa. So, man, that's a big one.
It's interesting how life is. Like I took my big water cup in, but like vacillated, like, do I take my cup in the church? Do I not? Old me would have had God knows what in this cup.
Right.
But I was able to feel the feelings. And I say this not in a super cheesy way, but they said something about my relative and I laughed and then I snorted because I laughed. And it was very funny and appropriate to laugh. And then like a little bit later I was crying. But I got to experience that without being like super numb, agitated. So, and then speaking of change with friends, I went to one of my dear friends' houses after and I met her in the Daymakers.
Oh, cool. Oh, yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
who was it? And I was like, I know.
I thought it would be really cool to pair that experience with some support.
Mm-hmm.
And we're from our hometowns are close to each other. So it was the next right thing to do. So my point is when you're going through these big changes, there are a lot of good on the other side of the struggle.
There really are. And I was going to mention, don't you think it's, I wonder what it is when you quit drinking, there is this urge to change a lot of things. And I know in AA, they're like, don't change anything. Like it's one of their things. In Daymakers, we might be a little different than that. But I know for me, I was like, this is the time. I'm going to quit my teaching job. Okay, this is it. We're going to start building this house we've been talking about. Now, all these things were things I had been talking about as a drinker. So I don't think they're considered, I mean, they are major changes, but I don't know. I guess I'm just saying I've noticed that with other people too when they quit drinking, that they've made this one change and now they're ready to make this next one. And maybe it's because it's so exhilarating when you finally feel free from alcohol and you feel so powerful. But
right. And I wasn't drunk. So I had lots of time to think about, like, with my whole brain.
Yeah.
About what I want and what my life looks like. And
yeah. I just wanted to I thought about that when we were talking about like professional change, how we hear a lot in the Daymakers, like, I think I want to change my job.
Yeah, we do. We really do.
And we'll help walk people through that and be like, are you just trying to make a rash decision? Or where's this coming from? Let's work through it. Let's see how it's going to go. But I was going to let you get to your next segment of talking about coping with change in sobriety.
Right. Now, it's all fine and good. Heather's defined everything to the kingdom come, but now what do we do about it? So, as we were saying earlier about acknowledging that you're going through a change and a transition, mindful acceptance, and it's important. But when you think about alcohol, mindfully accept the purpose it had in your life and the purpose it currently has and is there space. And then you can do a little thought work. Like, I'm noticing that I'm having the thought or being crippled by the change in my alcohol-free journey. If you just put the I am noticing in front of it, it creates a mental buffer.
It does.
To mindful acceptance.
I've used that one a few times since you've shared it. And it really does help to just say, I'm noticing I'm having this thought. It sounds very simple, but I really urge you to try it because it's helped me a few times.
Give some distance so that you're not like, I don't drink. That's a big change. Like, I'm noticing I don't drink. I'm noticing it's a big change. It just give some distance from the concreteness.
It really does.
And building resilience. And Sarah, you did a great call on resilience recently. In your support system, like Daymakers or another group where folks want to be the best version of themselves and make some tiny change at least every day, right? For the better. And then taking care of yourself by eating more nutritious foods, being intentional with your body, being in a state of gratitude versus deprivation.
Yeah.
So that you can learn to be more resilient. You can make a list of, can I control this? Can I not?
Yeah.
And it gives you a guidepost. And then Sarah and I's favorite, new routines.
It is. It's so my favorite because goals fall into routines a little bit. And I love a goal.
Yes. And, simple routines, like I said earlier, altering your route home, adjusting your meal times if possible, or your mealtime routine. And change up the routines associated with booze.
Yeah.
Do not go to your old watering hole on day 2.
No, God, no.
Do that.
Don't do that. I do talk to people sometimes that say, "Oh, I'm gonna go. I'm not gonna drink." And I'll always say, "I don't think you should go."
Not a good idea.
No. And a lot of times
I've never done that. That's why I say that. If I'm being legit, I would have failed before I got in the door.
Exactly. And it is, I get it. It's a social thing and you're used to having that social setting. You still want it. You don't want to lose everything when you quit drinking. And that's, I worded that totally wrong because you really lose very little when you quit drinking. You gain so much, but you don't want everything to drastically change. So you want to go see your buddies.
Right.
Those buddies at the bar, they're not going to get it when you're like, oh, I'm not drinking tonight. Well, then why the hell are you at a bar?
Right. FaceTime them if you want to see them.
Right. If you want to see them so bad, text them. There's just other ways to do it and there will be change. And that's what these things will help. So, and that's something too that Heather and I help with is helping you figure out, well, what's the new thing you do now after work? If you always went to the bar, what do you do now? And
Yeah. And if I sound insensitive, there was a bar in my neighborhood that I could not enter my neighborhood when I quit drinking without passing. So, like, I get it. And it's a bad idea.
yeah. And I think sometimes there just needs to be that little level of tough love when somebody is saying, I really want to change this. Okay, then you're going to have to do some hard things. I didn't hang out with friends for a while. Like, I just had Ryan, had my kids, and was like, I'll just stick to this, my tiny little bubble, and then I'll slowly expand where I
Yeah.
felt safe.
Same. I couldn't hang out with, I couldn't function on day 3. Lord have mercy, let alone be in public after during my witching hour, you know?
Yeah.
So, some more tools and strategies that Sarah and I have talked about, journaling, and it does not have to be Dear Diary. It can just be bullet journaling, brain dumps. The app How We Feel is free, and it can track your emotions and your progress as far as your emotions. It's pretty cool. There are sober apps. I use I Am Sober. You can track the days and gives you some inspiration, and just making lists of what you can control and what you can't. Something I wish that I had done is take a daily journal of my pros and cons.
Oh, that would have been so cool. Oh, one thing I was going to say too with journaling, I know it can feel really overwhelming of like, well, what do I write down on this blank page? And I talk a lot about, well, I write down my gratitudes and then I write down my affirmations and then I do a brain dump. Like that's my journaling and it works for some people too. But another thing I do when I am thinking, this is big, this thing I'm trying to process, you can go on Pinterest and you can search journaling prompts for after you've moved, journaling prompts after you've gotten a job. The internet can be such a cool tool for all of us. So go use that and start going, oh, that's a good question. I'm going to journal on that one today.
Yeah. Something that I've been doing, and Sarah, you know from working with me and knowing me for years, I've struggled with talk to text, or like when I send you a voice memo, it sounds crazy. But what I've learned to do is talk and it texts out the words. And then there's my journal, and I don't have to sit down because God forbid. But if you are like me and you're really hyperactive and it's a good way to get it out, and you can do it on your notes app or wherever you want.
Yeah, no, that's a huge tip because I do think some people are really overwhelmed by the either typing or writing process. I am, and I voice to text a lot.
Right. Well, I get distracted when I'm writing, and if I'm talking, I'm less likely to get distracted.
Exactly.
And then visualization, which I think is so key. And since I started doing it last year, it's been so helpful. It helps with building your confidence through the change. It helps with reducing anxiety. And it's so, like, as an example, my daughter is 4 and we have hit are there monsters under the bed type of thing. So we talk about what she's going to dream about at bedtime to set the stage for rainbows and unicorns, not green one-eyed monsters.
Yeah.
So that's a way of visualizing ahead.
Yeah, I'm with her. I do that before I go to bed, actually. I think of all the good things and I slowly drift to bed, and it really, really helps.
Yeah, it really does. And then goal setting. Sarah and I love some goals and breaking them down into smaller pieces and making them more manageable in terms of the steps and action items.
Yeah, that's a huge one. And I feel like I've got a big thing I'm working on for No More Wasted Days. And right now on my to-do list, it just says, make the brain dump. And I keep being like, I don't know. But one thing I do is then I can bounce ideas off my husband because he works on everything with me. And then I can say, okay, well, what do we need to do before we launch this? What is this going to look like? And then we can just start doing that. And then you can pick from those things and say, okay, I'm going to do that one today and that one today. But it's the same with when you move. I did it this past week. We needed to do a huge land cleanup because through the process of moving our trailer, we've looked a little, what's the show with the Beverly Hillbillies? We looked a little bit like them. That happens from time to time on our land. But it was just like things that were kind of under our trailer being stored, but we no longer need them. Okay, we needed to manage them. So I actually broke our land down into quadrants or sections and went from when you're driving onto our land. So then the kids could go, okay, we need to do the yurt deck. Okay, we need to go over by the duck area. Okay, it's the same thing with goal setting, breaking it down into those little pieces so it doesn't feel as overwhelming. And we cleaned up the land in record time by doing that. So think about how fast it could help you hit your goals.
Yeah. And trying to do this without judgment, have an accountability person or kindability person in your life can be really, really helpful with the goal setting, whether it's 30 days alcohol free to try to step toward embracing a change. Like that can be a goal.
Yeah,
For real.
it really can.
So we talked about understanding the nature of change, the types of change, tips, tools, and strategies. I hope that you all found this helpful. And I wanted to share that we hit 50K listens on the pod.
Yeah, 50,000 downloads and listens. Thank you all for listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
Me and Heather love doing the podcast, and
Yeah.
it just warms our heart to know other people enjoy listening to it. And if you've been a listener for a while and you've got a friend that you know might enjoy it, share away.
Yeah. Yeah. Put us in some ears. We want to help as many people as possible. And that's where the ratings and the reviews come in, because if it helps little podcasts or big podcasts even stay visible to reach as many people as possible.
It really does. And we're getting closer and closer to the 100 ratings over on Apple. So hit that star button.
Yeah, I love reading them. I'm going to do that when we get done today because it makes me happy.
I know. When a new review pops up, I'm always like, oh, it's so nice it's the only way we can really connect with our listeners. So it is really cool when we get those reviews.
Yeah. And check out the link in the show notes and we'll be in your ear next Tuesday. Bye, y'all.